The weather will be changing a lot over the next couple of weeks as we have a big cold blast that'll be impacting a large chunk of the United States, which will bring the potential for some severe weather on the later half of this weekend into early next week. And in addition to that, we are going to see our first snowfall for parts of the United States as we go into next week. And we are also still talking about the tropics, as we do have a tropical storm right now in the Caribbean Sea. This will eventually move into the Gulf of Mexico and could bring some impacts to areas like Florida as we go into next week. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather that'll be impacting the United States over the next 10 days. Let's go ahead and begin with what's happening across the country this morning, which for the time being, you'll notice there are hardly any clouds across the entire Great Plains and also the East Coast. The only exception being back over on the immediate East Coast, back over in North Carolina and also in the Northeast, where there have been some showers. We even had a brief tornado back over in North Carolina, at least radar indicated, back over in southern parts of North Carolina yesterday, but overall it was a pretty quiet last 48 hours when it came to any severe weather, despite us having a couple low risks of tornadoes for the last couple of days. You'll notice back over on the West Coast as well, there isn't much really happening there anymore. We did have a lot of rain falling in both Oregon and Washington. The atmospheric rivers have at least winded down here for the time being, but they'll probably pick up again as we go later into the weekend. And then right down here, that big red blob, that is Tropical Storm Sara, which is actually over land at the time of recording this forecast, but it's basically flirting right now with Honduras. And the problem right now is that all of this right here, all that convection, is very heavy rainfall that is going to be falling over Honduras over the next several days, and that could lead to some areas picking up 15 to 25 inches of rainfall. So a catastrophic situation right now occurring in Honduras from a weak tropical storm, by the way, with maximum sustained winds around 45 to 50 miles per hour. I think today's forecast is pretty important because there have been a lot of changes to the long-term forecast across the United States for the next 7 days, including our next large storm. So let's begin with the jet stream to kind of give you an idea of the weather pattern that's happening right now. And for today and tomorrow, we're going to continue to see a large ridge in place across the Great Plains and also the East Coast. That'll keep things relatively warm and dry for many areas. We'll have a trough back over on the West Coast that'll bring some showers, but overall not really going to be much of a factor up until probably the weekend. By the time we get closer to the late weekend, we'll have a little clipper system going through the upper Midwest, which will bring some passing showers, but aside from that, nothing much out of that. Really, our next large storm is once we go later into this weekend. By the time we go into late Sunday, a trough is going to be digging back over in the Four Corner states, and this is going to be our next big storm. This one's going to bring the potential for severe weather Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It'll bring the threat for heavy rainfall, some snowfall as well, and also much colder temperatures. So you'll see this as we go into Monday into Tuesday. We are actually going to have a negatively tilted trough moving across the central and southern plains. Now, for those that are familiar with a negatively tilted trough, this is actually what brings the potential for an increased level of severe weather. So I do think on Monday, this is definitely going to be something to watch for, where we have a strong southerly and southwesterly flow that could promote the potential for a more significant severe weather event to take place. But we'll talk more about specific details on that here in just a second. As we eventually go into late Monday into Tuesday, this will quickly move to the north. I don't think we're really going to see much in terms of severe weather on Tuesday. I think more than anything, this trough will be so far to the north, we're actually not going to really have much of a strong southerly wind at that point, so there won't be much moisture back up in areas like the Midwest. However, there will be enough moisture for like things like rainfall. Just the dew points will be too low, I think, for severe weather. Eventually, as we go into Tuesday into Wednesday, we could even see some snow on the back side of that trough. Here's what gets really interesting. As we go into Tuesday into Wednesday, that trough will continue to move to the north and east, and what we're actually going to see on the back side of this trough is a very strong northwesterly flow out of areas like Canada, and that's what's going to usher in a lot of colder weather as we go into the middle and end of this upcoming week. So again, big weather pattern changes coming, and it is going to be pretty active, I think, as we go into next week. So you'll notice as we go into next week, we are going to have a large cold air mass that is going to move right through the central plains and over into the East Coast, where things are really going to cool down. Now, here's a big change that we've also noticed over the last 24 hours. This particular cold air mass was originally supposed to really impact the Great Plains as we go into the middle of next week. The latest runs here from the GFS model are indicating that, yes, those areas will feel a cool down, but it won't be nearly as significant as before. You'll notice that really dark area, that purple and blue, that is all really going to be concentrated over the Ohio Valley on Wednesday and eventually the East Coast on Thursday. So there have been some changes to the forecast here, and they're very notable because it'll make a big difference to who is going to see see snow, who's going to see severe weather, and really it's a completely different forecast, it feels like, because there's a lot of different moving parts that have all of a sudden happened here over the last 24 hours that have changed the forecast actually quite significantly. So to put this into more simplistic terms, let's go over into the future radar for the next few days, beginning with today and tomorrow. This is tomorrow, so we'll have that little clipper system moving across the northern plains and the upper Midwest, bringing mostly just some passing showers, a little bit of snowfall to North Dakota as we go into Saturday night into early Sunday. Eventually, as we go into late Sunday into Monday, look at all that moisture that is going to be kicking up here into areas in Texas and Oklahoma. Heavy rainfall and the threat for severe weather will return on Sunday, mainly to Texas for severe weather. Rainfall will be possible, though, in Oklahoma, Kansas, and as well as Texas. Also, notice the atmospheric rivers will return to the Pacific Northwest, where heavy snowfall and rain will return to those areas as we go into Sunday. Eventually, by the time we go into early Monday, we're going to have a line of thunderstorms moving across Oklahoma and Texas. This is where I think our potential for severe weather will be maximized, and that'll be mostly during the morning, I think, on Monday, and also heavy rainfall will continue on the north and east side of this trough for areas in the Central Plains. Once we go into late Monday into Tuesday, this will continue to move to the northeast. I think the severe weather threat will be mostly a morning threat on Monday in the Southern Plains, so just keep that in mind. I think the afternoon is a low risk. We could see maybe an isolated tornado or two if we get more of a cold core setup back over in the Central Plains for areas like Missouri and Arkansas, but I think overall the risk for tornadoes is going to be a little bit more on the low side on Monday. Eventually, as we go into Tuesday, all of this will move to the north. Heavy rainfall will be possible across the Midwest. There is a big difference between yesterday's forecast and today's forecast when it comes to this particular storm. Yesterday, we were talking about potentially a more significant winter storm in the northern plains, and obviously this is still about 5 days out, so things can change, but this is a pretty dramatic change. You'll notice there's really not going to be much snow falling, it looks like, on Tuesday or Wednesday. If any snow falls, it's back up into Canada or right along the Canadian and United States border. So this is a pretty big change here. Obviously, this is something that is very different from yesterday, where initially it looked like we might see a couple of feet of snow in some areas in the northern plains. Now instead, it is actually going to be more of a dry air and also colder air that is going to be moving out of Canada that might limit that potential threat. Again, things could still change. We are still about 5 days out from this happening, but this is obviously a pretty big change from yesterday. As we eventually go into late Wednesday into Thursday, this trough will move into the northeast, bringing some showers and heavy rainfall to the northeast. There will be a potential for snow, but again, where the snow falls and how much snow falls is very uncertain since we're still about 6 days out from this happening. And eventually, as we go late Thursday into Friday, there will be a chance again for lake effect snow back over in parts of the Great Lakes region, so Michigan, and also back over near Lake Erie. We could see some lake effect snow sometime by the tail end of next week into the weekend. But again, I want to remind you that since there was already big changes over yesterday's forecast to today's forecast, there could be more big changes with this, whether it is more snow falling or having no snowfall at all. Again, things could very easily change here over the next few days. It looks like we'll be in a drier pattern, I think, by next weekend, and then things might get active again as we go into the following week closer to Thanksgiving. But for the time being, again, even then, Thanksgiving is still well over a week out, so things definitely could change there. Here's what we're looking at in terms of rainfall for the next 7 days. Overall, the majority of the rainfall will be across the Midwest and the Central and Southern Plains. So even if you don't get snow back over in the Midwest, there will be a potential for anywhere from an inch to a couple inches of rain there. Areas in the Southeast not going to see much rain unless the remnants of Sara reach Florida, which right now is a question mark. But Sara might bring some rainfall to Florida, which we're going to talk about more in detail here in just a second. And again, this is a big difference from yesterday. Look at the snowfall accumulation that the GFS model has over the next 7 days. And again, this is bound to change. This is definitely not locked in place. The Pacific Northwest is pretty much locked in place. Many areas there will see several inches of snow, but this is where the question mark is. Who is going to see snow and how much snow is going to fall? Again, we don't really know. Unfortunately, if you're looking forward to your first snowfall in the Midwest, the chances of that are starting to go down again. It looked like it was on the rise, and again, it's just going down on the downtrend here over the last 48 hours. Now, the changes keep coming with this forecast, and again, we're going to continue to see changes over the next few days, so if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe down below. This is another change that we're noticing. The temperatures over the next 7 to 10 days, well, again, over the next 3 to 4 days, they're going to be above average. The things will change, though, by the middle of next week, but notice the cold air mass that's supposed to move across much of the United States right now does not look nearly as impressive or as cold as what we saw yesterday in terms of the forecast. So right now, the temperatures do not look to be as cold, but we'll still be dealing with below average temperatures, I think, for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week. Here's where things get a little bit more interesting, is areas like the Ohio Valley might actually see see the coldest of these temperatures, so definitely be prepared for that. We could see some below freezing temperatures there on Thursday or Friday, and eventually by the weekend things will still be below average, especially across the Ohio Valley and then back over along the East Coast. So what does this actually mean for the temperatures? Well, for the time being, things are going to get a little bit colder, especially by Wednesday night. This is the high temperatures for Wednesday. Again, notice many areas in the Midwest in the 30s, areas like Oklahoma in the 40s, and even back over into Arkansas in the 40s. And then eventually as we go into Friday morning, which is going to be another cold time frame, many areas even into the southeast will be waking up to temperatures in the 40s, and even back over in Dallas and Fort Worth, areas over there anywhere in the 40s and perhaps even some low 50s. So definitely going to be colder as we go into next week. But again, how cold it exactly gets and where freezing temperatures will line up still remains very uncertain. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. We'll keep you posted with the latest in terms of the temperatures and obviously any snow potential here across the United States. And we do have a big tropics update, and that is about Tropical Storm Sara, which is in the Caribbean Sea, interacting right now with Honduras. Right now expected to bring catastrophic rainfall to Honduras over the next 48 hours, with some areas picking up 15 to 25 inches of rainfall. The National Hurricane Center has put out their latest forecast, and right now they are not even expecting this particular storm to even make it into the Gulf of Mexico as anything that is tropical. This is obviously a big downtrend from a couple of days ago, where it looked like this had the chance to become something like a major hurricane. If you are a frequent viewer of the channel, you would know that we talked all about this on a video just a couple of days ago, talking about how this had the potential to become a major hurricane in the Caribbean Sea, and it had basically two different tracks, one of which would be more towards Florida, and then the other one more towards the Yucatan Peninsula as a much weaker system. This has thankfully taken a much weaker path in terms of intensity and has gone more towards the Yucatan Peninsula. I do want to say my forecast that I made a couple of days ago talking all about this was easily my worst forecast of the entire year. I do strive for the highest level of accuracy on this channel. We really try to avoid hyping storms up, and honestly I think the video a couple of days ago just kind of leaned too much in the direction of that, and it was not intentional, by the way. Again, 70% of computer models did show that we would see a hurricane or even maybe a major hurricane going towards Florida. The 30% that didn't were mostly going towards the Yucatan Peninsula, and I don't feel like I put that into perspective enough in that video. So with all that said, at this point this tropical storm will likely weaken out over the Yucatan Peninsula. It'll move into the Gulf of Mexico, but again is not expected right now to become a hurricane at this point. It'll eventually move towards Florida or along the Gulf Coast, where there will be some showers and potentially some heavy rainfall as we go into the middle of next week. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.